Welcome in and welcome back. I am here to talk about something I did not think I was going to have to address. I thought that it was going to be fairly cut and dry on what was going on here, but it seems it has not been. There are quite a few people defending something that I find morally reprehensible, but it is morally reprehensible in a nuanced way that I think needs to be expressed, and I think my argument against this needs to begin with the fact that I am, in fact, a free speech absolutist. Why? Why am I a free speech absolutist? Because bad ideas exist. Bad ideas will always exist. The only chance to combat them is to shout them down in the public space. So let's take an example. What is an example of this? A bad idea that's in the news often today, racism. Racism does exist. Racism will always exist. Why? Because hatred will always exist, and because blame will always exist, and because it is extremely easy to blame something on a visible difference between people. Because of that, something like racism will always exist. The only chance we have is to let people speak out in those ways and to explain why it's a bad idea, to shout it down in the public space. That's the only way that you have to really combat those things. Because what happens if you disallow the conversation surrounding said thing, said bad idea will propagate in quiet. Said idea will propagate in the fringes of society where good ideas cannot reach them. They will propagate in dark alleys. They will propagate in places, dark alleys of the human mind. They will propagate in private places where they will grow and fester. So I am a free speech absolutist because, look, everyone is prone to having bad ideas. That bad idea being raised and expressed is the only chance that society has to say, no, that's a bad idea. But much in the same way that your freedom to swing your fist stops at the beginning of my nose, your freedom of expression stops where someone else's expressed and informed consent begins. That's a big deal. As a filmmaker, full transparency, I have not seen Cuties. I will not see Cuties. I am giving the benefit of the doubt to the filmmaker, that the things the filmmaker said were supposed to be exhibited by the film were the expressed ideas intended to be expressed in the film. That is, that there was no covert mission in order to pass those images on to people who would use them for nefarious reasons. I'm not using that language. So, for a filmmaker to express that artistic and intellectual paradigm, they have to employ other people. In this case, those people employed are too young to express informed consent. So there's two big differences between something, now it's going to be backwards because I'm recording on a phone, between Lolita and something like Cuties is the involvement of other people. Lolita contains scenes which are difficult to read because of what's going on in them. much in the same way that scenes in Cuties are supposed to be uncomfortable. Both of them share that idea. Lolita, however, is a book written by a single person. Book written by a single person. Cuties, being a film, involved how many hundred people, right? Including, it meant the involvement, exploitation, and sexualization of actual children. Now, here's another piece of nuance that keeps popping up whenever I see people defending Cuties, for some reason, is the term minors. Now, I understand, under the definition of the law, someone who's 11 years old is a minor. Colloquially, however, if I say minor, you don't think 11. Colloquially, the term minor somehow insists 15, 16, 17 years old. So this little piece of language referring to these 11-year-old girls as minors as opposed to children is meant to shield the criticism. Now, it may not be overtly expressed in that manner, but you have to look at the actual usage of the language. Who calls an 11-year-old a minor? I've never seen it. Never in my life have I seen or heard that. That's not a minor, that's a child. So, that's the first big point of difference between something like Lolita and Cuties. Next, I want to move on to something that I think is the most damning part, which is an extremely fine nuance in these arguments. I'm going to read you the opening of Lolita. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Lo-li-ta, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down to the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Lo-li-ta. She was low, plain low, in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. She was Lola in slacks, she was Dolly at school, she was Dolores on the dotted line, but in my arms, she was always Lolita. Did she have a precursor? She did, indeed she did. In point of fact, there might have been no Lolita at all had I not loved one summer a certain initial girl child, in a princedom by the sea. Oh, when? About as many years before Lolita was born as my age was that summer. You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, exhibit number 1 is what the seraphs, the misinformed, simple, noble winged seraphs, envied. Look at this tangle of thorns. That is the opening of the novel Lolita as written by Vladimir Nabokov. In this opening, not only does Humbert acknowledge that he is wrong, he refers to his crime as murder, and while I will not ruin the novel for you, know that there are fates worse than death. There are fates worse than death. That said, this novel is a test of susceptibility. This novel means to seduce you. But this novel is a test of your susceptibility to Humbert's seduction, not a test of your susceptibility to Lolita's seduction. As I have heard Cuties explained, as I have heard Cuties, and I think fairly so, I have heard Cuties explained in this way by opponents of Cuties, that it is not meant to service the most detestable members of society, but it is supposed to exploit the fact that those individuals in the film are seductive to certain members of society. With something like Lolita, the test in the text is your susceptibility to Humbert's seduction, not the fact that Lolita is capable of seduction. And I think that's where Cuties falls short. One, that it involves the exploitation of actual children. Two, I mean, who knows what those girls are going to grow up and think? Looking back at the things they did, they had no idea what they were doing, right? Two, Lolita focuses on your susceptibility to Humbert's seduction, not Lolita's. As far as I am concerned, those are the two places where something like Cuties falls short.